Hello and welcome to another Lord of the Rings Rise to War video. I am the player who plays as the Witch King under the mountain, and this is another part in the series of videos called This Is My Hour, covering this season against the Lone Office, and a few others as well to be fair, but that's been our main fight so far. So just deciding to talk you through where we're at. I'll just try and show you the map. This is on BlueStacks and it's a little bit better now, but it's not massively better. They have made some changes and I'm going to try and talk through those today. Excuse me. To the dynamics of how tiling works, and you can now move to your own tiles and to people in your kingdom's tiles with the move option, which is quite good. Probably going to talk for a couple of little bits about battle tactics. And then really my main focus is to talk about the Witch King, because I think he's kind of been written off in 2.0 and it's not ideal, but I can see a use for him, which I'll show in a couple of reports. Admittedly, I lost both, but the principle's right in the way that he can stop Sauron from stealing something like a White Council in a formation where perhaps Gandalf the White hasn't got the highest initiative. So we'll look into that, but first of all, we'll start with the map. So as you can see, the map's not really changed too much in regards to colour in the last week or so, but it has changed quite a lot in what's going on. So because of the difference in tiling dynamics, we got really lucky, to be honest, whereby we were at this pass here at the Undeeps, and we were kind of going backwards and forwards because they couldn't really get 3 or 4 tiles into here, because as soon as someone tried to occupy a tile in the kingdom, someone could hit them, they'd die. We would try to take this, we were getting the other side, someone would hit us, we'd die. The change to the tile mechanics, if I'm being really honest, happened just in time for a war buff that we had, and it was really lucky how that worked out. So what that actually enabled us to do was it's enabled us to take this pass at the Undeeps, and if I can actually find the Undeeps somewhere in here amongst all the pins. See, BlueStacks is still pretty slow. It's basically allowed us to pretty much control the entirety of the Undeeps. There's not many red tiles left there now at all. I suspect, and I don't think I'm saying anything out of turn here, we'll probably try and take the Undeeps next war cycle. So that's a big positive for us, because with the way the dynamics worked before they got a little change, and fair play to the developers, they have, well, whether they've listened or not is a different thing, but they've obviously seen the game was quite unplayable and sort of changed that. So they've changed it so that it's now at least barely playable. So I think if we occupy the Undeeps, no longer is this kind of control area around the ring, so should make the season a little bit more exciting. To be fair to the Lone Office, they're not just fighting us, they're also fighting me up here. So they're a little bit stretched, but Axed is kind of in this area here, who are kind of co-fellowship, and we're kind of fighting through here in the east, and we've made good progress here as well, to be honest. We're quite close now to the keep over here, if I can find where I am. So we've been pushing all the way down round, and we're now kind of here, and we haven't faced a great deal of resistance this morning, so I'm not entirely sure if that's mainly because there isn't a lot left in the tank for them, because they are quite stretched at the moment, so we'll probably try and take advantage of that at some point over the weekend. So that's kind of the server update. We're also, again, we're very friendly as well, because we've known him from previous with the kingdom that's set up in the Land of the Five Streams, which is Echo, which are another great little fellowship with a couple of fellowships in there. So it's a great little kingdom. Then you've also got, obviously this is ours here, but you've also got, this is Meat's kingdom, which is kind of all gone round here. And then in the north, you've got June, and June have kind of been helping the Lone Office by sort of sporadically attacking up here, but I don't think they're as big as Meat. So it's probably on the cusp of being a little bit imbalanced at the moment. I don't think it's quite there yet, but it's probably close. And hopefully we'll have a look at that, because I think it's been a great season for fighting so far, if nothing else. So just taking a look at contribution and things like that. So in the Fellowship at the moment, I'm trying to catch up with the monster that is Varon. I mean, the guy's got an absolutely whale account, and I think it's pretty much played 24/7, and I'm trying my best to keep up with the killing, but it's a different animal to me. As for chapter progression, we're on to chapter 9. This countdown obviously happens for as long as it happens. All the other chapters have been unlocked so far. We're nearly at the point whereby this should pretty much go straight through, I would think, and then we'll be into the battle for Dol Guldur. If I was the Lone Office, I don't think this chapter could come quick enough. And I think if they could speed it up, if they're being really honest, they would accept that it's done today. As for me personally, again, just for production rankings, I'm sitting around 12th. I've got some free tiles, and I'm not really in the position where I need any more tiles at the moment. My production's pretty healthy, and my market's very good. This is where the Fellowships sit. In all fairness, this has changed a little bit in the last few days, where I would guess from the Undeeps, Axed in particular, have taken a few tiles and sort of changed that production ranking, because both Det and Bank were in second and third. But there's some big production in this server. And SPQR, who we haven't really seen a great deal of, to be honest, but they're obviously in that kingdom with meat, and again, decent production. So it's been a pretty well balanced, well packed server. How long that lasts for, I am unsure, but at the moment it's still quite fun and everyone's still quite active. So we just move forward, because with the way I know I've explained this before, but just in case you haven't watched one of my videos before, I tend to swap gear between two formations. So at the moment my gear's on the Gandalf the White one, so I would ideally like it not to hit Sauron, who's got no gear. Is this main? Law's main formation, so that's going to take some hitting. So at the moment, the two formations that I'm running, again, blue stack's pretty painful. I've swapped Skalhelm out for the Witch King, and I'm going to try and explain why a little bit later in the video. So in my main formation at the moment is Witch King, Dane, Gandalf the White, and Bjorn. And in my second formation, I've got Gimli, I've got Skalhelm, who is actually shining a lot more in the second formation because there's a lot more damage for her to do. Then there's a Shadow, and then there is Sauron as kind of like my tank, really, he's got a little bit of initiative for trying to steal things with the Madness proc. From a troop kind of point of view, and it's very much whatever you can get your hands on, I guess, sometimes, but I've been using a lot of Crushers. Mainly because of these kind of skills here, so they're dropping defense, and we're reducing defense stat again, you see. So again, I like Crushers. I think they've got decent HP. I prefer them to a Tower Guard, because not many people are actually running mounted this season. Witch King with Felbeast is really important to the build that I'm trying to run here, partly because of this skill here. And like I say, I will talk about it a little bit more, but it's more around this level 5 skill and the initiative. So he's kind of like, I see him as a bard, but of a focus kind. So he's kind of like a support damage kind, which is quite nice, actually, as far as it goes. And it's allowing these guys to do a little bit more damage. Then we've got some Morglarbs in here. And it's not really for their damage so much, but a lot of people are running Eagles and Felbeast, so their natural sort of damage range is quite nice. Also, with them being a ranged troop, it's allowing my damage dealers to take less hits, because people have kind of got to get through these two with normal attacks before they can hit them. So we're seeing Dane at times, which my Dane kind of normally does about 130k, but with that formation, to be honest, it's getting to a point where he's actually able to do sort of 150, which it's a nice little boost. So I can't really complain too much about that. What else was I going to show on this? I was going to show the kingdom, so can I... Is it this one or this one? It has to be in target, I think. Yeah, that's it. So where we are for the entire contribution. In the teamwork rankings, we're currently in the top 50. We're sat about 6th. That's actually gone up quite a lot. I was about 12th a few days ago, but we've had some pretty intensive fighting for the last 2-3 days. Like I say, we've sort of got about 600k merit in the last week or so. So it's been a busy week. Barracks situation's still pretty good. I'll just pop back over here. There is a bit of a bug at the moment in the barracks, which I'm presuming they are trying to fix. But if I try and do this, it's actually going to let me do it now. Sometimes it doesn't actually let you treat people in your barracks or train new troops even though there's a gap. Well, it kind of catches up with the lag between your barracks. It's a bit weird. But resources are good at the moment. We've just had the ring buff, so resources are pretty good. Training a lot of fell beasts to just take a lot of time. Again, helps with the Witch King build. And to be honest, the other day we were actually uprooting bases with fell beasts and eagles while we had war, while people were sleeping, which was a really good tactic, and it's actually allowed us to kind of push forward as far as what we've got. I have created the Guardians Barracks. I haven't done anything with it yet because at the moment, to be honest, I'm quite enjoying the Crushers. I always produce some Tower Guards just because I think it's important to have some troops running which are not on hire. So realistically, I think if you're playing a Kings and Men season like this, you need to have some of these troops training all the time alongside your other ones, or you might end up running out of troops. And the reason for that is because these guys still come into your barracks every 100 or so, and these guys only come in whenever they've finished. So if there's 5,000 of them, it takes 7 hours. You've got to wait 7 hours for the 5,000. It's not ideal if you're in a quite intensive fighting kind of server. So they're kind of my two main tanks, and I switch between the two. Obviously, the Morgals are helping with the damage dealers. And then in the same way, and it's just kind of like, I guess this is kind of how to create a barrack situation where you can keep fighting and kind of keep tiling and those kind of things. I have got some swans. I've kind of moved away from swan knights for trolls, if I'm being honest. But that's a different story because I've kind of moved away from cav, so I've still got a little bit of cav left if I want to run some. I would probably start running that if I saw a lot more infantry. At the moment, I'm not seeing a great deal of infantry around. I'd probably switch around. I've got a great deal of these large flying units, and that's to do siege. It's for the Witch King build with fell beasts, and it's also just sometimes it's good if you're trying to attack from range, so you can actually pick targets. I do like that about the new system, that you can use these flying units and you can pick targets a lot more without having to try and connect to them. The other parts of the barracks, there's some trolls, and I've got a few great beasts, which I did start using great beasts, and everyone says they're fantastic. If I'm being brutally honest, I hate them compared to trolls for a couple of reasons. They're a great tank, and their skills are really, really good. So they're increasing damage to range, which is fair enough. If you run into a full eagle comp, I can kind of get it. Troop damage isn't really the meta still. They're adding a tiny little bit of defense, but this is a really important skill. So the free enemy formations prioritizes attacks on this unit. That is for the whole fight, but what I've found is it just means they tank too well, so they end up dying a lot faster. So even though they've got the physical damage minus 10% skill, they're dying faster because they're taking literally every single hit. So you're allowing your damage dealer, yes, the time to go and do it, but then after one fight, you're kind of quite low on the sort of great beast, particularly if you're not like a super whale or a kraken. So for me, I prefer the troll. One, they look cooler, but two, that taunt is similar, obviously, to the Swan Knight taunt, and they just last a bit longer because they're not taking every single hit, and they've still got the 10% less. They're also half the cost of a great beast. So as far as I'm concerned, if you're fighting all day, you go for a mountain troll. If you're probably not as active and you can afford a great beast, go for it because they are a better tank. They just take too many hits and die faster, but at double the cost, it's not really for me with the sort of style of play that I do. So the other parts of this barracks, which I don't know if I can't actually train them, but I'll have them in my barracks because I've been using conversion. So I also use conversion, and that's why I've got these kind of guys in here. I've got a few war drummers. I got them off. I really messed it up actually. I should have had about 140-ish war drummers from a not a tip, but there's kind of like a guy on the map. And at the time of Barracks was at full, I only got 19, so it was a bit stupid really. So I've still got some Bjornings which I use from time to time, which is again just getting rid of troops. But these guys are currently the ones that I'm getting through conversion with crushers. So realistically, I'll put them on my second formation just to make sure I'm not getting through the volume of crushers that I'm getting through. So I kind of didn't intend it to go this way, but I suppose really I've just talked through the barracks. So what I would do with my barracks is I'm making sure I've got higher queues higher in a couple of the larger units, which, you know, they take a lot of time. I'm making sure I've got conscription queues going so I can keep troops going all the time. And then in the background, I've got conversion, which is allowing me to bring in more troops at no cost from these mobs. That's kind of the mindset of how I will build that formation, and that kind of way I put troops together. And you will sometimes run slightly suboptimal compositions, but you are able to stay in the fight and help your teammates a lot longer, which ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, is more important. As well as keeping the game fun, I think, sometimes. I think there's a lot of it that gets a bit serious from time to time and people fall out, so that's kind of how my barracks works and the mindset of my barracks, because sometimes it can look a little bit messy and the troop compositions can look a little bit strange. It is literally to purely keep myself going. And if I was looking at a sort of pure, this is my first formation, this is my whole kind of troop comp, I'd probably set up a little bit differently. But the fact of the matter is, I don't really get that luxury and I get asked to fight a lot. And it's the part of the game that I enjoy, so yeah, that's kind of the mindset around that. This fort's nearly done, which is a bonus. I presume we'll start trying to uproot in bases soon without war, so I'll probably send around a little bit of siege soon. I have already done that once today. With Gothmog. So that was one of my siege formations. I think it is important to keep doing your scrolls. I know people can get lazy with them because you don't really feel like you need them after you've got your first couple of formations up to 40 with the way the leveling system now works. For me, I think it's important to get as many people up to 40 as possible because siege is now such a massive part of the game. You're just helping your team out. But then I guess I'd like to get into probably the main topic of conversation really for what I was going to talk about in this video. I'll just make sure I'm not about to take a hit over here. No, we're all good. And that main topic of conversation, I could do grabbing that thought actually, is around the Witch King. So I think he's had a really bad rap going into 2.0, and in 1.0 he obviously went from being, you know, pretty much the king of evil to sort of slipping into a kind of a B tier position where I feel it was a little bit unjust for him, but when you're being countered by a tier 2 Gandalf the Grey as easily as he was, I kind of get why he fell from grace. Still, even at that point, if he hit the right not the right formation, it wasn't formations then, if he hit the right commander, he was still incredible and he was still wiping through 4 or 5 armies, but it wasn't like the people who had him in sort of a season 1 and 2 where he literally melted 10 armies and it was amazing for people who had him. I'd never had him until this season. As soon as we got to 2.0, I made myself a Witch King because I'd always wanted one, and I kind of saw some kind of benefit to him apart from the fact that he looks pretty cool. I actually think his relic's okay. It's not fantastic unless it's really fully refined, but I do think it's okay. I think it's a lot easier to get to these places now, particularly this one, but to get the sort of hidden grasp, I think it's a lot easier. It does help with what you're trying to do with him. You do want him to tank a little bit. I don't use him for Black Captain. I know some people do, and I think that's why they're a little bit disappointed with him. If they ever improve troop damage, I think he'll be amazing, and I think he'll go straight back up to the S tier just because of the kind of stuff that you can do at high respect, which is a pretty bold statement, but I'll try and explain why, because obviously his key skills are in here. So at the moment, I'm running him like this. I see him as a elemental damage dealer who is kind of a burst nuke, I'll be honest, because you've got a Ringwraith, which happens pre-battle, tends to miss Sauron because he's got quite a high base initiative. It's got quite a nasty stun on it as well on the level 10, and obviously the level 5 skill. He also deals some poison damage, so his actual damage dealing's it's pretty good. Focus isn't as good as physical, but the Ringwraith skill's quite good. It kind of does act a little bit before your white councils and things also, so it's quite nice. Good early burst damage. Lord of the Nazgul is another skill that I like, and I'd normally have this maxed out, even if just so it helps out with the -10 defense. Again, it's every couple of rounds, so it's quite a lot of focus damage, and it's also trying to inflict a stun. So for me, his kit these days has got a lot of crowd control in there, which you need in those early rounds, and it kind of helps your white councils and things last longer. So I just think he's had a bit of a bad rap, but he's got two pretty much damage skills, and he's got this R5 skill, which I think is genuinely really important. And this is probably my favourite thing about him at the moment, and I will keep using him just to keep testing this, and I'll show a couple of reports in a minute about it. So with the way that damage and things are at the moment, this here to me is really important. And this is only 2 commanders, granted, so there is a little bit of RNG in the Witch King and what he's doing, but for 5 rounds, that's quite a swing, particularly when people these days are aiming for that soft cap, for example, on attack or focus of around about 200, although the focus one really scales better. So for attack in particular, that's a lot of attack if you're sort of, people are trying to be around that cusp. It's not so bad if you run into, if you're hitting a Bjorn that's got, say, 240 attack, this 10 to 20 that you're taking off isn't really going to make too much difference. But if they're looking at around about that 200 attack mark, which is where my Dane's at, this is quite a big sort of difference if it hits the right person. Granted, it's got to hit the right person, but it is a big difference. Also, say if he hits the front of a formation, which tends to be the tank, this sort of defense drop, again, quite handy. Doesn't matter so much if you use too many elemental damage dealers, obviously, but if you've got your physical damage dealers, that defense drop can really help you chew through some people. And he is helping me increase the damage of people like Dane and Bjorn, so... And I get they're massively overpowered, but that's not really... I'm just trying to add to the fact that he has got a good kit that helps. This is the key one for me, and this is where I feel he can counter Sauron. I say can because it doesn't always happen, because he can hit the wrong person. There's kind of a devil's advocate to that, but... and I get everyone can't get Felbeast. It is quite niche, it's quite specific, but it's worth taking into account considering every man, the dog, the farmer, the man down the road, the Buddha, the religious man, whatever they might be in these servers, are pretty much running a Sauron in one of the first 2 formations if they're looking to PvP a lot. And what this does is, this -10 pretty much negates the initiative gear set that Sauron has, which is pretty much, the extra skill that gives you +10, or the fact that he's trying to get a lot of initiative to try and steal things like a White Council through madness. So I'll explain that better in a second, but it's this part of it that's really interesting. Also, at level 10, it's quite nice because you're obviously getting the stun immunity, which, I can't really complain. If they ever boost troop damage... And you're running kind of like, particularly if you run into eagles, I mean, you just melt people if you're running arbs. But this whole thing of, 75% chance to follow up in 3 formations, attack gaining +5, and it affects 4 formations at level 10. If they ever buff troops, and he keeps this kit, I think he's actually still one of the best commanders in the game. That's a little bit controversial, but as far as a support damage goes, I don't think you'll see much of a better kit. Just a bit of a food for thought on him. But I'll try and explain now why it's important. So his initiative's quite high anyway. His base value is 44. Whereas Sauron, for example's base value is 26. So even with a lot of heavy initiative gear, Sauron's not necessarily able to steal that White Council or whatever you want it to do, because the Witch King tends to act first as long as he hits. The skill that I'm talking about, by the way, I better actually tell you this, is this Deceiver skill, and everyone's running it with high initiative for this reason, because it happens in pre-battle, and I will show you the report in a minute. So it's 35% chance to inflict madness on the target for 1 round, and it affects 3 formations. Now, from what I've seen of this skill, and call it as suspicious as you like or whatever you want it to do, this madness tends to always hit a Gandalf the White, and it tends to always steal White Council and White Rider, and it can have such a massive impact in fights, which I'm going to show you in a minute. I've literally got 2 examples of, one's a loss, one's a draw, but I consider both a loss, but at least the loss isn't as bad because of how sort of Witch King has countered this. So that's what we're trying to counter, and this is what people are trying to use all the time in the game. So if I just pull up the 2 reports and make sure I haven't died. No, we're all good. So this is the draw. Now, as you can see, don't get me wrong, right? Again, in my new favourite phrase, it seems, this guy's formation is worth more than my house, my garage, my car. And it's really painful because he's actually a really good guy. So when he does beat you, at least he does it with a smile, but that's not the point. So as you can see, really good gear. I mean, I'm not saying my gear is shabby by any stretch of the imagination. But it's not quite the same level. Now you may say, okay, this looks pretty heavy, and it does, but if you delve into the battle report, there is a massive reason why I haven't just taken him out and probably taken about 2k losses here. So if I delve into the pre-battle report, which are painfully long these days, and we come down to here, so pre-battle phase. So this is what we're interested in. Witch King activates this, so he takes down the focus and attack, which you'd expect. Happy days. He activates his Ring Wraith, and away we go. The issue that I've got here is that from the Fell Beast, he triggers Lord of Minas Morgul, and it hits Dane Eyefoot, and it hits Gandalf the White. That's not ideal for what I'm trying to do. I want this here to hit Sauron, and I will show you why. The problem I have now, because it hasn't hit his Sauron, is that Sauron acts before a lot of my formation. And this Madness skill, sadly for me, shall we say, happens pre-battle. So that you things like your White Council that also happen pre-battle. It's not ideal if Gandalf the White's already been inflicted by Madness, because he could cast it on literally you or your enemy. So at this point, wherever I can see it, there's Bjorn, damage received, damage received. It's quite nasty still anyway with the damage received. Thankfully Bjorn, it didn't really matter, but he kind of like tried to get away from the madness. And that's what we're really interested in here. So Gandalf the White has been affected by madness. We then come down to Gandalf being clever and fantastic. He activates White Council, but the issue with this is he's beset with madness, couldn't differentiate friend or foe, and he casts it on the entirety of this guy's formation. He also, just for fun, does the same with White Rider, which, like I say, not ideal, because then we go down into here and we see what happens. So this is my opponent's Gandalf the White. He adds 25% damage to all of my army, pretty much there, right? For fun, my Gandalf the White also decides to give the entirety of all my plus damage received to myself, and also decides to give everyone else, as you can see here, my White Council. This is why I get absolutely wrecked in this battle report, because my White Rider and my White Council goes straight to my enemy. And this is why it's just such a massive swing. I hope I tried to explain that clearly. I'll now go back and show you this, which is still a loss, but I'm not full, and I've left pretty much the same as what his army started with before. And the reason for this is, on this occasion, this doesn't happen. Because what I want to happen from the Witch King actually hits the right formation. If I can find it. I just want the pre-battle phase. In this report, basically, my Witch King hits the Lord of Minas Morgul, and he hits Sauron for the diminished initiative. Basically meaning that when it comes to this, my Gandalf gets a chance to get in here and actually activate his White Council on himself, and the fight goes much differently for that reason. Because we stopped that initiative boost from the Sauron gear. So that basically we negated this agility set, plus 10, by the Witch King skill hitting the right person. The issue that I have with this is it doesn't work every time. And the other issue that I have is it's a little bit niche. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you can get through to Fell Beasts. But I do think it's very important in the current meta to have something that can counter a Sauron. And I get sometimes a faster Sauron can counter a Sauron. I know some people try to run, say, a slow Gil, which a slow Gil could get absolutely sort of pulverized by Sauron because he can actually have the evasion skill pulled away from him by madness, and he can try and actually cast it on Sauron's army. So that was kind of my main point of today, just to kind of showcase that I do think the Witch King still has a value in the meta. Is it a little bit niche? Yes. Is it high end? Probably so, yes. But even if you're a sort of free-to-play player who's been lucky enough to get a Witch King to R5 over the period of time, and you got to a point whereby you couldn't really refund your respect vouchers and things like that, I do think as a damage dealer who has got a good support option, I think, in his R5, should probably still make it into your main formation. And with that, if I'm being honest, that's pretty much all I've got for you today. It's been a really intensive week's fighting. I don't know if this will actually show up, so this is sort of a few fights from today. There's been a lot of them, to say the least, and trying to use two formations it costs you some troops sometimes, but like I say, it does keep you in the fight. I appreciate my account's bigger than some, which allows me to kind of do this sort of thing, but it's been a really intensive kind of fighting few days, really. And we've been going for a couple of armies at a time sometimes, which has been quite nice and felt quite good. But with that, as always with these things, I do ask you to trust yourself, so make sure you always follow your nose, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video.